Hello and welcome to Hanratty on Karate. I hope you enjoyed this series on karate camps, seminars and stuff. I certainly did. Brought back a lot of memories, particularly from Crystal Palace and California, and even some over in Europe. And definitely Revelstoke, which I enjoyed immensely, and Esquimalt. A lot of good people, not all of them with us these days, sad to say, but that's the way life goes. So today I was teaching a class, beginners, on Saturday morning, just a novice class, but we get a lot of black belts come in. They use that class as a warm-up for their session. And we're doing your basic Kions, and we'd renovated the dojo recently and hadn't put the Makiwaras in the dojo, which is something I'd like to see done straight away. Anyway, when we were doing our warm-ups, I had people just jogging up and down, get some blood flowing. You know, the usual calisthenics you do for warm-ups, bit stretching, and bit of push-ups. And I said, now you have to do your push-ups on your first and second knuckles only. And of course they were all whining and whinging. And I said, well, it's going to put strength into your wrist, because I guarantee you when we're going up and down today that at least 40% of you, maybe even more, are going to be punching with your fist cocked either up or down or out to the side. So I explained, you know, when you're punching, you want a straight line through your knuckles, through the wrist, elbow, shoulder, down into your hip. And this is like Shuto. If you hold it, your hand up straight, point your fingers straight up, and then run a line down your little finger, down through your hand, down through your wrist. You don't have any bent wrists in Shuto. You shouldn't have. And one of my favorite sayings is, you don't have a bent wrist. In fact, you don't have a wrist. I'll give it you back when you get to knee down. So it just helps keep their wrists steady when they're punching. And punching fresh air is never going to temper the joints. So this is why I like the Makiwara. Now, the other thing we do is we employ different kinds of fists, or different weapons, if you like, on your body. So your whole body basically is a weapon, but using that weapon, you need to temper it. It'd be like trying to have a sword fight with a very brittle piece of metal that hasn't been tempered and honed to a sharp edge. You try punching, that's why you see a lot of people, you see them on telly, they kind of overdo it. They punch somebody and then they're all, you know, swinging the hand going, ow, 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 I hurt my hand. A good karate man should never hurt his hand if he's punching right. I've punched a lot of people and never broke my hand punching somebody, except when they've kind of moved a little off target and I got a little break on just past the little finger on the bone behind. You're going to get this if you don't punch straight on, or you kind of hook it. It's called a boxer's fracture, actually, because a lot of old experienced boxers, they go in with their head down and you'll actually use the head as a weapon to break their opponent's hand. And it's usually the fourth metacarpal on the little finger that takes all the power, and of course it snaps. It's only a small bone. Bones in the back of your hand are actually quite weak. And if you look at somebody like Higawana, the very famous Goju master, he conditioned his body over years and years. And I remember a guy in LA, I used to know his name was Kubota, and I met him a couple of times, a real fanatic. This guy used to temper his shins and his forearms with a 2-pound lump hammer, and and also bang on his shins with a stick, and just to get the calluses up. Now you can get calluses up and they'll build up, but you don't just want to punch a Makiwara till you bleed. What will happen then is you'll have to stop punching it, otherwise you're just going to take all the skin off your knuckles. Is just build it up slowly and then build up to full power. Now, I've still got calcium deposits under the skin on the first 2 knuckles of both my hands. And this is from years and years of hitting a Makiwara. I used to have a Makiwara in my backyard. And basically I would use it to temper the first 2 knuckles, because this is your basic weapon. The basic weapon is a straight punch. And I'm not talking how you deliver it. I'm not saying if you use it from a front stance or a back stance or just from freestyle. But basically, your basic weapon is Seiken, front punch, right? You can use the same 2 knuckles for a kagi or a hooking punch. You can use it for a mawashisuki or a roundhouse punch, and you can use it for a urasuki, which is like an uppercut. So you look at boxing, you've only got about 6 punches, but they're all delivered, or they should all be delivered with those 2 knuckles. Now, when you go into some old publications, some old Okinawan publications, they start to do variations like iponkan, which is the first knuckle extended, supported by the thumb. So you make a tight fist, and then you push the first knuckle forward on the index finger, and you support it tightly with the thumb. So as long as your thumb's rigid, the knuckle should be rigid. That's nice because you're using, the second joint of the finger, not the third joint of the finger, which would be, the one you use in a straight punch. So using the second joint, quite sharp, and they go, you can penetrate the rib cage with this. But unless you develop and temper that weapon, you're not going to penetrate anything. You're going to break your bloody finger. And people don't realize this. They walk up and down punching fresh air, and they're not giving any force or tempering the weapon that they're using in any respect. And so I don't really advocate this. And to prove the point, a lot of styles use shutoki. So you've got a nice rigid open hand technique, kite technique, open hand, and they will make what's called a nukite, which is a finger strike. Now, you can use all 4 fingers, or you can use just 2 fingers, and in unsukata, you just use 1 finger. But unless you're going to temper that weapon, it's not going to do you an awful lot of good. It may give a little bit of shock and a slight bit of pain, but the whole objective in karate is to kind of finish your opponent with 1 technique, your kinesatsu, right? Finish with 1 technique. That is what we're looking for. So if you put all your power behind that technique, say ippon nukite or nihon nukite, which is 2 fingers, or all 4 fingers, right? You're going to just break your bloody fingers, right? So you've got to temper the weapon. And if you intend to use it, you've also got to pick the target you're going to use against. Now, I'm not saying the nukite won't work, because I've poked people right in the throat with 4 straight fingers, and it works. It works great. It will stop them absolutely dead, right? But you've got to pick your target. And a ponkan 1 finger strike will only work if you fire it at the eyes. Maybe if you can get it into the throat area, but it's just 1 finger. You want to go with 4 and horizontal and come upwards so that you get under the chin. So it's you've got to really think about that technique. It's a fine technique, right? You've got to look into the fine things. And that doesn't really happen when you've got adrenaline going. Your fine motor skills drop through the floor, right? And everything is just a big movement, which is good if you're interested in putting all the power behind your punches, but a lot of people don't. Like, I can bet you, if you can break a 3 or 4 inch board, and you see these idiots breaking concrete, breaking boards, and I'm not saying I haven't done it, people do it, curiosity, and I broke 2 inch boards, but I used to temper my knuckles, so it wasn't no big deal. Besides, the board's not moving, it's usually fixed, right? And you can hit it, and you can hit it with full power, but when you're in a fight, I guarantee you don't have time to build up that intensity. When you're looking at a board, and a lot of people try 1 or try another 1, 2, and then they build up the suspense, and then they go through and they do it, maybe after 3 or 4 warm-ups, if you like. You don't get that chance when it's on the line, right? You do not get a chance to do a warm-up. You have got to put all your power into the technique as soon as an opportunity presents itself. And you've got to pick your target, right? If you've got a full force punch and a guy just drops his head and you hit him on the top of the head, unless you've done something to develop your hand, it's going to break. Even if you do have a good developed knuckles and a good developed punch, hitting somebody on the top of their head is not advised. That's the thickest part of the skull, right? You're going to do some damage. You may give them a bit of pain, but your hand's going to bloody hurt, I can guarantee you. It'll be like punching a concrete wall full blast. So, all these 1 finger strikes, iponkan, which is the first finger, and nakadaka, which is the second finger, squeeze all the knuckles and then protrude the second finger. It may look good in a book. It may even look good when, you see them on telly where they've got the second finger extended and it looks really mean. But unless you've developed something over years, like tempered that weapon, it's going to just break and you're going to do yourself more damage than anybody else. So the best way to practice striking, punching, kicking is do it against an object or do it against a makawara or a punch bag. I have my students work on a punch bag and we do a drill where we start off with 10 techniques punching the bag, then we go to 20 techniques punching the bag, and we go on and on. It really tires you out. It's extremely exhausting. It's a question of stamina more than anything because your power starts to drop off. You're hardly moving the bag after a while. And if you don't keep your wrists firm, you're going to find that they get knocked back. You're going to end up with sore wrists, even worse. And so it does take a lot of conditioning before you can get into that thing. But you don't want to ignore it. I'm telling you right now, don't ignore it. If you ignore that and all you're ever doing is punching fresh air, you're going to get very good at punching fresh air. But anything else, you're going to get a shock. Okay? So it's the same thing with open hand strikes. Like stoki, which is a knife hand block using the ridge hand. Okay? A lot of people, they don't put any tension into the fingers. They kind of cup the hand. You're going to hurt yourself. Okay? You got to make that absolutely rigid, like it's a solid piece from the tip of your fingers right down through to the elbow. Okay? And using these techniques, then you may be able to get some joy out of them. But you don't see much shuto in fights at all. One thing I have used in a fight, and actually in a street fight, was haito, which is the inside knuckle of the hand. So if you can imagine a knife hand block where you're using the outside, okay, and the thumb is pulled back and down to give rigidity to the hand, pull the thumb in across, and you see the inside knuckle is exposed. This we call haito, okay? And haito is the inner edge of the hand, and thumb pulled in across the palm, and forefinger straight. And how I've used this is I've blocked the punch, come up around the back, and smashed it into the back of the opponent's head, and it gives a real shock to the occipital. I usually aim just below the base of the skull, so that's the occipital, and then below that you have your vertebrae going from Atlas C1, C2. C3 is particularly vulnerable because it's not really protected as much by the skull. So that's a good place to strike. It's a great place if you can spin your opponent around and use an elbow there, like an elbow strike. But I've seen so many elbow strikes that have gone wrong, and people, I've seen them chip their elbow when they're trying to do elbow drops onto boards and stuff like this. Again, it's a question of conditioning the weapon to suit the purpose. Okay, we have heel of palm strikes too. Now, this one is probably one of the safest ones, but not a lot of people use it, so it's called the taisho, all right? And you use the heel of your palm, and it's particularly good against hard targets like the side of the head, all right? Because you do have a cushioning on the palm that will take a lot of the shock away from your hand, hopefully transmit it into the opponent or into the target. So it's really great if you want to hit the lower jaw, the mandible, and knock it out of place. And it's great for the temple. The other thing, if I'm using the temple and I use a back fist strike, which is a snapping action, I tend to roll my wrist round just at the moment of impact, so I catch it with the first two knuckles, which is the two knuckles that you're going to use most often. So when I'm using a back fist strike or uchi, that's the way I do it. I fire it out, don't open your shoulder, don't hyperextend the elbow, and then just roll the wrist round at the moment of impact so you get a really sharp snap on it. And that's done me a lot of good in a lot of situations as well. You might see a technique described in some books as kumari, where you kind of make a bear claw of your hand. This one is quite effective, but you don't go into your target. You want to just brush the surface of your target if you're going to use open fingers kumari-like strike. You can strike the face, you can strike across the chest, quite painful, but you don't want any depth in it. You just want to go across the surface like you're trying to rip something off. And it's quite effective, but again, you need to have a pretty rigid wrist. Don't let the wrist bend. Okay? Just in and across like a claw. Imagine your fingers have got massive big claws on them, and then go through it. Okay? And you're going to definitely build it. Okay, so some of the useless ones, which you shouldn't bother even using it, is washi tape. Washi tape is only in one kata. Pinch all of your fingertips together and make it like an eagle head or a bird's head if you like, poking down. Actually, it looks more like a flamingo to me. You can poke down or poke up. And in this particular kata, you poke down and you poke up. And it's in Goji Shihodai. Or Goji Shio, depends whose style you look at. Kanazawa, it's Sho. Everybody else, it's Dai. So this is actually one of the most useless techniques. If you're going to ever use Ipponkan, the only time I've ever used Ipponkan to any effect, this is the one knuckle finger strike, is when I've struck across the back of an opponent's fist. He's standing there with his fist closed, and then you strike across it with the one knuckle strike, almost like in the kata chinte. It's really good because you'll probably, if you're doing it right, you'll break the bone in the back of the hand. And that's what you want it for. You can either do it down or you can do it across an edge. Guy put his hand up to fight, and then first thing I do, one knuckle strike right across the back of the hand, break the little bones in the back of the hands, then take advantage of the pain or flinch response that came immediately after and pound him. All right, so it was an opening thing. Another blocking technique I don't like is kakato with the back of the hand, okay? So you use the back of your hand. It's not bad for blocking, but it's certainly not a weapon. And I believe if you can block with it, you can strike with it. But I wouldn't strike with that. I can't think of anything that I'd want to strike with that. Okay, so that's kakato. So it's a basic hand techniques. It's the same with your feet, all right? If you're not going to turn your toes up and expose the ball of your foot for a straight front kick, you're in trouble. You have a number of techniques that are on the foot as well as on the hand. Okay, so basically the ball of the foot is the main one where we send it in. Some people and some styles, they say, well, you know, a straight toe with your toes really rigid is, yeah, as long as you, as I say, condition them, then it might work. We have the top of the foot, okay, which people use these days for roundhouse kicks, mawashigeri. I prefer to expose the ball of the foot if I'm going to use it for real. But it's quite handy for low kicks into the thigh or taking out the knee. Not bad at all. Heel of the foot for stomping kicks or thrusting at the knee. Use kakato again, which is the heel. And it's good for side thrust kicks. Side of the foot, sakuto, we don't use so much. I mean, it's used in kata, so you can see a nice position of the foot. But it's not always practical. So, you know, maybe think about your kakato. And if you're going to be in a confrontation that is outside of competition rules, you're probably going to have shoes on or boots on. Make full use of what you've got, all right? Most people run around in runners, so kakato is great for stomping on the instep. Wonderful technique, okay? Heel down hard on the instep really gives you openings if you can do it. Or straight thrust heel to the kneecap will give you just as good an open. Just like if you remember the kata unsu, as you bring your hand round into hasamiyuki, then kekomi, that's what you're going to use, that heel technique. Okay, so it's very effective. But any of them, they certainly require practice. They require tempering of the joints, and they require connection of the joints. If you look on every joint as a possible break in the coordination of the muscles and the power source, right? Whatever power source you're pushing from the floor, your feet to the floor is the only leverage you got. So back heel down, driving the hip forward, whether you're stepping or rotating, and then all the way through from the hip, push from the hip, lock the lats in, all the way down, shoulder down deep, drive in, and then keep everything as rigid as you can. And then you're going to transmit the kinetic energy you want to provide you with the technique that's going to get you out of trouble. Okay? So remember, it's all coordination, and the whole body needs to move at the same time and finish at the same time. All right? None of this touch and pull your hand away like you've won the World Cup. Load of rubbish. We were in Japan just a year or two ago, and there was a Japanese lady, not going to mention any names, and she was a world champion, WKF world champion, and she was showing some techniques, and one of my students, young Sandan, come up to me and he goes, "Is she actually showing us how to cheat, Sensei?" And I looked and I said, "Yep, because what you do is you throw a punch in, bounce the hand back before the hip had extended, hold it in the air like she'd caught the other guy, and deliberately try to hide the technique from the judges and then try to influence the judges dancing around with the hand in the air." And I said, well, apart from the obvious that the technique was non-effective, you were missing a lot of different points that we all look for, even when we're judging a competition. But out in the street, that'll get you killed, all right? And the most obvious, of course, was Zanshin. And Zanshin is a term that we use to describe the state of awareness that you must always keep. Always be aware of your opponent's ability to hurt you, even when you think he's finished. If he's twitching on the floor, he can probably still hurt you, okay? You step back, keep your eye on it. This is an attitude I like to instill in my students whilst doing kata as well. You finish your kata, don't just stand up like, oh, that was good, give me points or mark me up. No, you finish your kata, you keep looking at your opponent, bring everything back to the center and back to your starting position whilst being aware of everything around you. And this is a Zanshin, and you have to put this into your mind as often as you can, all right? Every day if you can. You're walking along the road, you may know the route very well. Just imagine, and I say this to the kids, you go to McDonald's, right? You go down the street and down to McDonald's. Are there any trees on your street? Yes, Sensei. Okay. How many trees? Oh, don't know, Sensei. How often do you go to McDonald's? Once a week. You never know how many trees there are on your street. I walk down the stairs in the dark and I exactly know what step I'm on. I'm not counting them or anything. You just know, all right? If you didn't know, you'd fall down the bloody stairs. So you want to try and keep this kind of attitude in every day, all right? Look, be aware, and keep this attitude. And it intensifies into Zanshin when you're in a confrontation, any confrontation. Okay, so I'll leave it at that for now. But as I say, practice tempering your weapon, otherwise it's no good to you. It's like fighting with a glass sword, right? Unless you've got it sharp and you've tempered it into something steel that you can use, not going to do you any good. So all these guys that just walk up and down the dojo every day, punching and kicking fresh air, good luck, all right? Might look pretty, ain't going to work. Hey, that's it from me, so take care. Any queries, comments, questions, let me know.